Hello Makeup Void, I'm Trin and welcome back to my channel. Beginning of the month I wanted to do, or beginning of January, I wanted to do kind of a shop my stash for eyeshadow palette videos and not do No Pain Left Behind, not really give myself a challenge. The challenge of itself is to see if I actually use these palettes in front of me. And if I was filming 2 days a week, you would have seen this video last week, but I just didn't have the mental capacity to film 2 videos last week, and I think I had a couple excuses as to why I couldn't do that. Anyways, you're seeing this video now. Last month was I picked some eyeshadow palettes that were stowing away in my closet that I decluttered last year, and I decided to pick out like 5 of them. I didn't mean to pick out 5, that was just kind of what I felt inspired to grab, and decide if any of these palettes were worth re-entering my collection. So that's what I've been doing for the past month, and I have some thoughts. I have pictures of some of my makeup looks. I've tried to choose as many, or try to show off as many as I can, and I think some days I just forgot what palette I used. So I don't know how many pictures you're gonna see, but, and also I didn't wear makeup as much as I normally do in January. That was kind of like a goal, not goal to do, and then I realized that I need to do my makeup every day. So give this video a like, dislike, subscribe. Let's go ahead and get rolling. Off with the palette that is just on top is the ColourPop or Kid You Not palette. First problem is that pretty much every time you open it, the mirror falls down, and I think I'm just gonna carefully, I'm not going to try gluing the mirror in. Again, I'm just not going to do that. I need to set this somewhere that's not going to shatter into a million pieces, because really with a palette this size, I can see the argument that a mirror in a palette this size is good for traveling. I can see that argument, but I would never bring this palette to travel. It's a beautiful monotone color story. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just this palette is super dark, like incredibly dark, and when I use an eyeshadow palette, I try not to dabble into other palettes at the same time. I think with one look I did with this, I only did 2 looks with this palette, because after one I pretty much made up my mind, and then my brain was like, I should use it again. So safe to say I'm not bringing this palette back into my collection, because it's just generally too dark for a regular basis for me. I don't really want to go this intense for an eyeshadow palette, or like this depth of an eyeshadow palette on the regular, so it's just not worth keeping for me. With all of these palettes, I don't really know what I'm going to do with them, whether keep them, get rid of them. If I do choose to keep them in a declutter pile, still don't know what I'm going to do with them. But this is a really pretty palette. My consistent problem with ColourPop is that their shimmers are just not that spectacular. If you're a baller on a budget, the shimmers are great. For me, trying indie almost exclusively, using indie almost exclusively for last year, I'm just not impressed with their shimmer formula. The mattes are spectacular. It's just this palette itself, it's too dark for me to consistently want to use. So I'm going to officially say goodbye to Or Kid You Not, and if I do give it to somebody, they're not getting the mirror. I think I made the point of this palette, you can make the argument with a palette that size would be good for traveling, but that color story I would never travel with, just absolutely never. So a mirror in that small packaging, I think there is a benefit to it if you do a lot of traveling, but because of the color story, I personally wouldn't bring it. Okay, the palette that is on my eyes is the I forgot. The Beach Cosmetics Retro Love palette. I think I need to move my numbers. Okay, so including today, I used this palette 3 times. Do I have 3 or 2 pictures for you? I have no idea. So this is what the palette looks like. And this was a struggle bus for me. My first look with it was very creative. I went out of my comfort zone. I kind of did, like, not really out of my comfort zone, but I went back to like 2016, 2018 me, where I used a bunch of different mattes for a look, and that's just not my style anymore. And that's what this month really showed me with these larger these larger palettes that have a lot of mattes. It's just not my everyday style. It's just not it anymore. And so while none of these palettes have really a bad formula, I mean, ColourPop, you could argue, but it's just the size of the palette and the many mattes I have to use with it, it's just a little daunting and not what I do on a regular basis. I think the video you saw last week, I used the Retro Love palette. I literally just used these 2 shades right here. That's all I used for that simple look, and I want to do simple looks with this palette, but I feel like you just kind of have to do more than 2 eyeshadows to get like your worth with this palette. So I'm not keeping it. I liked all the looks that I did with this palette. It's just there's just too many mattes. That's not my style. It's not my vibe anymore. And on a work regular basis, I really don't want to use mattes, because for me, that's just extra time in the mornings that I do have that extra time to spend some time blending out some mattes, doing some pretty creative stuff with it. I just don't want to do it. Like, I have my morning routine down to a science, and I know by like X amount of time I need to stop doing my makeup and go downstairs and eat breakfast, and even that's more time than I need. So it doesn't even matter. I can spend more time with my makeup. I just choose not to. So this palette's going back into the closet. Well, it's still pretty. It's just it's not it for me. It's just not. Next is the Beauty Bay Wilderness palette. I use this palette, my count is 7 or 8 times, because I have been using this pretty consistently, but it's a stupid reason, and that's for this shade, which is called Snow. It's like really light, but it's like a skin tone color for me, so I don't know why it's called Snow. But in my original video where I was talking about these palettes, I really want to use this bottom row, really kind of get out of my comfort zone with the reds, and I didn't do that. Didn't do that at all. I don't know how many looks I have to show you with the palette on its own, because most of the times I use this palette, I was just reaching into Snow. I'm trying to use up the e.l.f. Lock It Down eyeshadow primer this year, and I have a long way to go. Eyeshadow primer, it takes forever to use up, and I want to use it up because it's not my favorite. So the reason why I was reaching into Snow so many times was the fact that, that e.l.f. eyeshadow primer, you need to set with a powder. You just have to, or else you're in it creasing. With my Ulta Beauty eye primer, I don't need to do that. With the Milani one I had, I don't need to do that. So it was just, this was kept being used for an extra step, and my brain is like, you should keep it out and like not declutter it so you have that shade in arm's reach. But my brain is also like, you have the e.l.f. Halo Glow powder, you have the CoverGirl purple powder that you just refuse, or you're just too lazy to repress. So I don't want to use powder anymore, because it's just the rim around the inside of the pan, and I need to repress it to use it up, and I just don't want to. So I could like use my e.l.f. Halo Glow powder to set my lids. This has just kind of been my go-to for doing that. So same thing with the Retro Love palette. There's just too many mattes. I can't be bothered on a regular day, and the majority of this palette is green. So I don't want to do green makeup on the weekends. I am over wearing dark green. I've been wearing dark green for my work uniform over a year now. I'm sick of green. I tell myself that I have to do a green eyeshadow look once a week for work, just because make that part of my uniform. So, but there's so many greens in here. There's so many green looks, and and there are different tones of green, which you can argue is really good. So you have this nice minty with this dark green, kind of sage green row, and then you kind of have this more olive green row. Really nice versatile greens, but they don't really work well together, so I don't find myself combining the two rows. I don't even think I did this warm mustard shade that I was so excited to use. So I'm not, spoilers, I'm not keeping any of these palettes. All of them are going to the declutter bin. And I need to talk about this next one before I forget, because it's literally been over to the side. And that is the Glam Light Margarita palette. I used this palette 2 times. I don't care. When I do use mattes, I want a deepening up shade, and I mentioned already that I want to stick to one palette. So it's not you, it's me. And there's just, the mattes don't really go together. They have like a light, I don't even know which one's, that's a shimmer. So you have like this light blue and you have this mint green, you can't really combine them in a look because from far away they look like the same shade. So you can't really get that versatility out of those two colors. The deepest shade in here is this red matte, which doesn't go with these two colors. If you don't care about shadows going together, yeah, you can use the red with the mint and the light blue. Absolutely. Personally, I'm not going to do that. The shimmers in here are just fine. They're fine. Like the BH Cosmetics, it's not even, I've been saying BH Cosmetics this entire time. They're Beauty Bay. They're Beauty Bay palettes. I don't know. I think I'm just getting BH. Like BH Cosmetics doesn't even exist anymore, so I don't know why I keep saying that. They're Beauty Bay palettes. So, and I like the shimmers in the Beauty Bay palettes way more than I like them in these. This is my only Glam Light palette. This is the only one I care to. And then I think it was right after this, they started doing IPs upon IPs, and I'm not really devoted to any IP except for Pokemon, so it's just doing IP collabs. It's just, I don't really want a palette, even though I like the color story, because it's tied to an IP. It's just not something I want. So I haven't purchased anything else from Lamplight. They've been kind of doing like, I don't remember the last time they did an IP, not an IP collection. Anyways, this is just, I don't like it. You have this beautiful yellow, but there's no yellow mattes in here that really complement it. Like the closest here is that. It's just not. The formula, it's just, I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't want to ramble anymore about it. I just don't like it. Next, we have the ColourPop Lush palette. This palette was a struggle bus. I technically used this palette 3 times. Technically, I did a green look, like I said I would. I did try playing in with some of the warmer tones, which I didn't like it. And then in the last look, I used a matte for a workday. Because I want to use blue, and I was like, I should use this palette again, so I literally just used the blue. I don't think I even have a picture for that, just because I was like, to remember each of these palettes and all the looks I did, I tried doing like the, like where you pose with the palette in the picture, so I can remind you, remind me for memory to figure out which palette it was. So I don't even know. I know for the blue look, I didn't take pictures with the Lush palette, because I was like, why, when there's other stuff on my eyes. So for the blue look, I did reach into other products to finish the blue look, because there's no blue shimmers in here. When I do a blue look, I'll maybe do blue and green, but I don't really want to combine any other colors, so I just stuck with a blue. And it's a fine palette. It's really good. I bought it because Angelica Neefkis said it was the best palette of the year, like, I don't know how long ago when the US palette came out. So I just fell into the hype and I listened to what she said, so I bought it. And have regrets for, I think I did it like 3 years where I bought the palette that she said was #1, or no, I think it was just 2 years, and I regretted both decisions. And the other palette, I think the palette after this year, after the year she ranked this #1, I also bought that palette, and it's already decluttered. I think it was a BH Cosmetics palette. I think it was like a Paris themed palette. I have no idea. I decluttered that after having it for only like 2 or 3 months. So it's fine palette. It's ColourPop. It's not my fave. I think the funny thing is that I think all of the IP collabs that I do have currently in my collection are from ColourPop. So, like, but it's Pokemon and Star Wars, so that's like my only exceptions. Okay, last palette we have to talk about is just a bunch of my random singles. These are singles that don't really go anywhere else, and my goal was, tell me, I did a look with this one time. That was 2 times. Pretty sure it was 2 times. Either way, I did not get use out of this palette. I have these 5 shadows over here are from Terra Moon. I have them in a separate spot in my makeup inventory spreadsheet. So I did reach into the Terra Moon shadows several times this month, but they're part of my makeup inventory, so I didn't count them towards my random singles. I know for sure I used this old ABH shadow, and I was like, oh my goodness, where have you been? It's like, seriously, I've missed you so much. It was beautiful. And then the other look I used, I think this is called Buffy from Give Me Glow, and then I think I paired it with like this ColourPop shimmer, and it was a fine look. It was fine. Nothing spectacular. So I want to keep Buffy and I want to keep the Subculture Shadow and the Terra Moon. So it's going to be on my to-do list to reorganize my primary magnetic palette that I use on the regular to kind of fit those shadows in. But the rest of these, I just didn't feel inspired to use them. I looked at it and I was like, no, I don't want to use this. So this random singles was a struggle bus. So I need to reorganize and try to see if I can move some of those singles into my primary magnetic palette. And this, I've told this along the way of talking about all these eyeshadow palettes, and it contributed to the fact that mattes are just not the way I do my makeup anymore. I was doing a lot of testing new eyeshadow palettes last year, so I was pretty much forced to use mattes in all of those palettes to figure out the formula, to see whether or not I liked them. But on a regular basis, now that I haven't purchased any palettes this year, I am just going back to just using like an eyeshadow stick or a liquid eyeshadow as a base, putting something shimmering on top of it, and then using eyeliner calling it down. So when I haven't been using those palettes, which was primarily on the weekends because I was like, I have these mattes, I did the ColourPop Lush Green look I did do for work because it was green. But generally, it's just not what I want to do. So mattes are kind of a waste. So with that full confirmation, like it's not a full realization, but just confirmation of how I do my makeup, I want to be real with palettes I'm picking out for this month. So first of all, I am only bringing out 4 palettes instead of 5 because I don't want to pressure myself into giving it a hard and fast rule of always making it 5 palettes. I want to have multiple palettes. I want to have fewer palettes that I use more often than just palettes that I'm reaching for just because they're part of a project and I feel like I need to use all of them. And again, I didn't really wear a lot of makeup in January. I still did makeup a lot of the time, but it was way less than I normally do. And then I realized that I need to do my makeup every day. So back doing that. So February, I hopefully have a lot more looks. First of all, so I don't like using mattes. So I brought out the Bella Beauté Bar Angles of Illumination palette. This is literally just all shimmer shadows. That's what it is. And I'm just bringing this out because this is the way I do my makeup now, and I'm just going to roll with it. So I ranked this pretty high in my eyeshadow palette ranking last year. I did rank it relatively low because it was limited edition. It is no longer available, so I didn't want to rank it like number 1 like my brain was kind of maybe saying to do, because it was limited edition and I wanted to make number 1 a palette that you could actually purchase. But I adore this palette. One and done looks. Maybe I'll use one of the darker shimmers to deepen up the outer corner, but this is just a one and done palette for me and I love it for that. Okay, next palette does have mattes, does, but I miss you a lot. That's the Fantasy Cosmetica Cradled and Ice palette. And for the good majority of last year, I did think that there is makeup stain on this palette that I'm trying to scrape off. A good portion of last year was like, this is gonna be my number 1 palette of the year, and then other stuff happened. So this is a palette. It is like 50-50 matte and shimmers, but I'm looking at this shade right here. I'm looking at this shade right here. Maybe looking at this shade down here. And I just want to use those shadows. I just want to have fun and play with those shadows. That's it. So I'm only really bringing this palette out for 3 mattes or 3 shimmers, and I'm okay with that. Like, that doesn't bother me. I still want to get use out of this beautiful palette. So my brain is also like, you should really play with that bright pink or pastel pink. You should really play with that pastel pink. So I'm going to probably use that as well. I just really like the shimmers in this palette, so I'm going to bring it out. That's my logic. And then I am revisiting some old singles, bringing back some singles that I've not used in a long freaking time, and I want to bring them out. So starting off with a magnetic palette, and these are all of my Lethal singles. I have not bought from Lethal Cosmetics in so long, and that doesn't bother me, but this was a spam of 2 purchases. So this side of the palette was 1 purchase, this side of the palette was another purchase. And then I don't know where I bought those 2, when I bought I'm pretty sure I bought the 2 multi-chromes with like the pinky purple side of the palette. So there are a lot of mattes in here. So this is kind of like my weekend makeup playtime palette. I don't know how much I'll reach for it like during the work week, but definitely on the weekends when I have the mental capacity and the time. Well, I still have time in the work week. When I want to use mattes, I do have a lot of mattes that I can use with this palette, and I just want to use these. That's kind of my thing. I just want to use them. I want to see how I remember, if I feel about them. And they're not the most spectacular. Like, the multi-chromes are phenomenal, but the rest of the shimmers are not like the most spectacular multi-chromes or shimmers, metallics. They're not the most spectacular, but I just want to play with them a little bit more, see if I can change my mind, maybe see a little bit vibes. This is not a palette that I'm going to go through, pick apart the singles and discard the ones that I don't want to keep anymore. I'm going to keep it as a full thing. So let's see how many looks, how much playtime we can get with this palette. And last, rip to this entire brand, the magnetic palette. These are all of my JD Glow singles, and I wanted to have a rainbow of them, so I bought warm tones that I know I won't use. So there's that. Beautiful, beautiful. There is a dupe. I accidentally bought a duplicate of one of these shadows, but when I like had that realization when my second eyeshadow came in, I did actually swatch them and realized that even though they're technically the same shade, they look vastly different. So I don't know which ones are which, but this is a palette I can see myself decluttering some of the shadows. I bought them in like 2019, 2020, so 8. I mean, a lot of people are like, I've seen on Reddit that some people are like, yeah, I'm still using a palette I bought in 2010 and it's totally fine. So like, good for you, but I really don't want to do that. So like, I'm gonna lie to myself. Right now, I'm gonna lie to myself and say my goal is to use these warmer shadows. The yellow, 100% I'm gonna use, but the red, the oranges, am I really gonna use them? Let's be real, am I really gonna use them? So I might keep them around because like all of the shadows fit perfectly in this palette. I didn't mean to do that, it's just the way it worked out. But again, it's just, I'm being realistic with the way I do my makeup on a regular basis. And a palette of just shimmers is what I do on a regular basis, so I'm going to stick with this. So those are palettes I'm picking out for February. My brain was like, oh, you should do a theme for Valentine's Day, and I remember like my No Pan Left Behind project, I think it was October, where I had a bunch of like Valentine's Day like color stories and I hated it, so I wasn't going to do that. I don't really want to theme everything around a holiday, so you're not going to see that. I might do it for one season this year, 1 month this year, I have no idea. But I wanted to pick out palettes this month that I was going to be realistic with the way I do my makeup on a regular basis. And honestly, you never know, I might take out some mattes and play with them. It's only going to be from the Lethal palette pretty much, but I might take a shadow or two from the Lethal palette and use them with my other palettes. I don't freaking know. So I did allow myself to bring in a couple of mattes, but that's not my primary goal. That's not the primary way I do my makeup. So that's all I have for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Give this video a like, dislike, subscribe. I will catch you on my next video. And it's gonna be next week because I don't think I'm gonna get another video up this week. Let's just be real. Alright, have joy and bye!